Well, if there is one debate that has divided experts and economists more than anything else in recent times, it is the state of the Indian economy. They all agree on one thing, that growth at 5.7% is low, lower than what we had anticipated, and so must be corrected. Clearly, there is a recognition that something has gone wrong. But what economists can't agree on is the extent to which the economy has been hit and why. Was it demonetization? Was it the impact of the GST? Was it both? Why are we not generating jobs? And what has happened to private investment? These are the key questions that we're struggling with. Well, we're happy to have with us on the program tonight two leading economists who have differed very publicly on this issue. Surjit Bhalla, who is a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council that was just recently set up, and Pronob Sen, who is the former head of the National Statistical Commission and member of the Planning Commission. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. You've both been sparring, at least through newspaper articles, on your respective views on the economy. Surjit Bhalla, let me begin with you. You actually began that by writing a piece about how we shouldn't decline this debate on the economy into ideology, personal attacks, or make it a gossip column. Why did you feel that it was becoming like that?
You know, it's sad, but it is true. That economic debate, and as you know, I've been coming on your program, I've been coming on NDTV for the last 20 years, literally, as it happens. And, you know, never before were disagreements about what has happened personalized or politicized. And, you know, that article of mine came right after Yashwant Sinha's piece, where I thought he had really reduced the economy to a gossip column. So this is tragic. This is not how debate should be. And that is why I felt, given my experience, compelled to write, look, there's enough disagreement amongst economists on interpretation. But let us not disagree on facts, if you will, at a minimum. And if you, at the maximum, let us disagree on why we interpret events to be what they are.
So you're saying your primary criticism there was directed at Yashwant Sinha?
No, absolutely not. No, this is a continuous process,
okay,
especially over the last 3 years. And I think it is the polarization of the electorate. We can go into why that has happened, but really it's become very uncomfortable giving one's views on any issue anymore.
Well, Pronob Sen, how do you feel about that? Is there an element of truth in that every debate now has become so politically polarized in this country that, you know, people will, for instance, cherry pick statistics, whichever side you're on of the ideological debate, and you know, for instance, tweet those or write about those or highlight those. And, you know, frankly, today, I'm very confused about what the state of the economy is, because I hear on one hand that we're looking at maybe a slowdown for a few years, and then you hear Christine Lagarde talking about good long-term economic growth in India, the World Bank saying this is just an aberration. So tell me, do you think that there's an element of truth in that?
Nidhi, I've been at this game for 35 years, all right? I cannot recollect any period over those 35 years where economic issues have not held center stage in politics. Economic issues have always been politicized. Perhaps the advantage was at that time the data was even worse. So it became a question of opinions because there wasn't any data. Data is a lot better today, although not as good as we would like. But nevertheless, you cannot divorce politics and economics. It's going to happen. People are going to have opinions. People are going to use whatever leverage they can get from what's happening in the economy to hit at the other. Remember 2004? Remember India shining? And the Congress piled on to it. The fact was, in an important sense, in 2004, India was shining. But that didn't make any difference. The thing is, these things do get politicized. You know, economics originally arose out of political science. It's a subset of that. It used to be called political economy. This is natural, and it's what we should be doing.
So let me ask you both now on the state of the economy itself. And Pronob Sen, let me begin with you. The situation as you see it today, what would be your overall assessment of things? Like I said, on one hand, we still have the previous quarter's GDP numbers, but there have been some indicators that have started to look up a little bit over the past few weeks. You've had the finance minister, of course, saying he believes things are going to bounce back. The IMF and the World Bank also sounding a lot more positive. What is your assessment, though? Are they painting too rosy a picture? Is the crisis actually far deeper than we realize?
You know, Nidhi, the point is, everything depends on who you are looking at. If you're looking at corporate India, I think all the instances that you talked about are absolutely correct. Right? 5.7% growth that we've had is slow, but frankly, in the larger scheme of things, it's not disastrous. At 5.7% growth, government doesn't really need to do anything. The real question is that number picking up the lived reality? And that's where the debate is. You know, in our statistical system, we do not capture the non-corporate sector very well, in fact, not at all in the quarterly figures. And the trend that we've been seeing post-2012 has been a steady erosion of the position of the non-corporate sector in India. And it's been a steady erosion. It was a process that was happening for all kinds of reasons that we can go into later. Then came three body blows, one after the other. The first body blow was demonetization. The second body blow was, and this unfortunately people haven't talked about very much, has actually been the restrictions on cattle trade.
The restrictions on cattle trade.
On cattle trade.
Okay, no one's actually talked about
Nobody's talked about it, and it's critical. And the third is GST. Now, these three body blows came within a span of 7-8 months. So my sense is that the non-corporate sector, which includes agriculture, is reeling. Agriculture, at least we know what's happening because the data is there.
But it's the areas where we don't have the data, where you're saying where.
But even in agriculture, again, we've seen 2.3%, and everybody says, yeah, 2.3% isn't bad. But the fact is, all of us were expecting closer to 4%. Then the chief statistician comes in the press conference and says, crop agriculture, which is dependent on monsoons, has done quite well. What has really got hurt is animal husbandry. Now, if that has happened, it's something which is very serious, because in rural India, among farmers and also landless labor, animal husbandry is their insurance.
And actually, so what you're saying is you believe that the crisis, there is a much deeper economic crisis that is not being reflected in the numbers.
Right.
Okay, Surjit Bhalla, you heard all that. What did you think?
Well, what started off this flurry of activity by my critics, and Pronab being one of them, was actually the following statement, that I saw a genuine puzzle, an underlying puzzle, in that the agricultural wages, no matter how you measure them, whether you measure them for carpenters or general agricultural laborers or plowmen, plowwomen, across the board, there are about 22 categories that the government reports on, that these wages for the first 7 months of this year, which is post-demonetization, had shown the highest rate of increase. Now, if what Pronab is saying is true, and I said it's a puzzle, which means I don't know whether it is true or not, my conjecture was that, listen, the agricultural wages are tied, or wages in the rural areas more accurately, are tied to the rest of the wages in the system. However imperfectly, anybody who studied the Indian economy knows that while there are distinctions, really, things are connected. Otherwise, we might as well give up the study of economics, because really then you're saying, don't confuse me with facts. Things are connected. Rural wages are connected with urban wages. Unskilled workers' wages in the rural areas are connected with unskilled.
What is the link to demonetization?
So I'll just come to demonetization in a second. So I said that there's a genuine puzzle, and they're growing in real terms about 5 to 7%. Now, what Pronab said, there is one additional factor, shock, if you will, to economists, to the RBI, to policymakers. In the Indian economy, over the last 2 years. And that is, rather than inflation being something like 9–10%, it is something like 2 to 4%. Let's call it 3. Economists really do not know, including statisticians. There's a genuine problem. What happens when inflation really declines? And this happened in the US in 1983-84 when Volcker was there. That, you know, we really have to study that. So this is another shock to the system, a very pleasant shock, I would think, but it does affect government finances, because now government finances are all based on nominal growth. So you've had demonetization, you've had inflation coming down rather rapidly, and you've got, in my view, policymakers, in particular the RBI, not reacting to that structural change, and you've got GST. And here we are, right? 3 big shocks to the system, and cattle, I think, is a shock, something that India economy can do without. But I won't put it on the same pedestal as the other 3. And here we are saying, oh my God, the Indian economy is slowing down, is not recovering, and so on and so forth. I see it as a puzzle. The Indian economy really has a potential GDP growth of somewhere around 7.5, 8. I think over the next 6 months, we will get back to at least 7. And if the RBI is willing and accommodative, all puns intended, then I think we will get back to our potential GDP growth.
Pronab,
let me finish. I do not see this as a structural decline. I see this as temporary, induced by the factors that we have discussed.
Pronob Sen, however, doesn't believe the numbers are reflecting the real sort of crisis.
Ask him and then I'll respond.
No, but how would,
no.
I mean,
what numbers? No, look.
He listed
Okay,
why he thinks so.
Let me now directly address my good friend's comments. He's saying, you know, he was the head of the Statistical Commission. I was a member of the Statistical Commission, at which time he was a junior member, if you will. So, you know, we've seen this movie before. He's seen it. I've seen it. We've worked with data. He's worked with data.
Do you think the data really reflects the reality of the situation on the ground?
Absolutely. I think the data, look, imperfect data, we all know data is imperfect.
But you think
the
it gives you a
idea
picture?
that we really don't know much about the non-corporate sector, I think I just don't buy that. There's just no evidence to support. We don't know as much as we would like to, absolutely. But to say that really the non-corporate sector is a black box of which we don't know anything, I just don't think.
Pronob Sen, you respond to that, and also if things were so good in the corporate sector,
they're not good in the corporate sector.
That's what I'm saying. So you have the non-corporate sector, which I think everyone agrees is an issue, is the question of how bad things are. But where are the jobs? You know, that's all people care about right now. And we don't have any reliable data on jobs. That's a fact. Bibik Debroy talked about that as well. But you do have, for instance, the RBI survey, which had a sort of very negative sentiment on the jobs front. The CMIE has also come out with new statistics saying India's urban unemployment rate in the week ending the 8th of October is 8.2%, the highest in the past 11 months. What is that telling you about the economy?
This is the same story. You know, Surjit is right, which is that inflation has come down. But what he hasn't talked about is where has it come down? It's come down for agriculture. All the stories that we've been talking about have been hits on agriculture and those sectors which are closely linked to agriculture. Inflation has come down for agriculture, but has stayed just where it was. It stayed at 4% consistently for a long period now for the non-agricultural sector. Right? So the farmer has got whammies from all different directions, including the fall in price. So what Surjit is interpreting as good news for the economy is very good news for the consumer. It's very bad news for the farmer. So when we're talking about farmers' distress, price is a contributory factor. Right? That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is, let me take this issue on the non-corporate sector. Historically, we have been using corporate sector data for non-corporate as well. Earlier, this was the case. It's still the case today. And it's based essentially upon a relationship. an historical relationship between corporate performance and non-corporate performance, and this has been a stable relationship. But there have been times when the two have diverged quite sharply. The first period was 97 to 2002, and we are going through it again. If we are in denial and saying that
is that why the Sensex is up?
That is why the Sensex is up.
And yet we have all these other indicators about the rest of the economy.
That's a part of the story.
Yeah.
It's a part of the story, but there are other components to that story as well, which we can go into. You know, bank deposits are down. Your mutual fund deposits are up, have gone through the roof. So what's happening is people are pulling money out of the banks and putting it into the stock market. That's a good thing in one sense, but it's a good thing for corporates. It's a bad thing for all the agencies, all the enterprises who do not have access to the stock market.
Which is, of course, a big...
Which is, of course, where all the non-corporate sector is.
But when Surjit Bhalla says he thinks that in 6 months we'll be back at 7%.
No, let's not go into what things. Let's talk about factual stuff.
No, you didn't say it. It wasn't a lie. You said that you believe...
No, I was going to answer your question on jobs.
No, I'll come to that.
Yeah.
Do you agree with the 7% prediction in 6 months?
In 6 months? Very unlikely.
But in your view?
In my view, the next quarter would possibly be even worse than this one. And the quarter after that, we really don't know.
So we should meet sometime in February, March. We should have us both together to see what our forecasts are. But let me come to the employment side.
Yeah, let's talk
the
about
job
that.
Side.
Yeah.
And this is where I really have to differ with Pronab. We have lots of data, not enough, very periodic, on the non-corporate sector, and this is from the employment and unemployment surveys. Now let me tell you the following statistic, which he knows full well. Between 1999 and 2004, GDP growth in India was 5%, give or take, and employment growth was 2.8% per annum. 2.8% per annum. From 2004 to 2011-12, at the period of the highest growth rate India has ever experienced, the very same data, which is the NSS, shows that employment growth was only 0.8% per annum. The point I want to make, so this is all non-corporate sector, everything else, so let's not fool ourselves that we don't have data outside of the corporate sector. Second, let's not fool ourselves that jobless growth or lack of jobs is only a current phenomenon.
It's happened before, is your
It's
point.
happened 2000. Let's also not fool ourselves that this is not a global phenomenon. Every country in the world is facing the crisis of jobs, and will, except for the US, and there are different reasons that faced the crisis earlier, but every country in the world is facing this crisis.
But the world economy is actually now beginning to look up a little, which is why it's
so
a bit
this
sad
is the
that
thing.
our growth forecast has
What
been
people
cut.
will have to face, the world economy, what did I just say? Between 2004 and 2011, Indian economy more than 8%, but no job growth. So the world economy is growing very splendidly and will, I think, continue, but where are the jobs?
But except that providing jobs was very much a political plank on which Mr. Modi
Okay, you
fought
now
these
want
elections.
to shift to, I'll come to the political plank. You
I'm
tell
saying
me,
that it
you
is
tell
an
me
important
one
promise.
political plank anywhere in the world which is not on jobs, which is not on the economy, which is not on GDP growth. Of course it is.
So if it doesn't happen, we should just say we should throw up our hands.
If I were running for election in 2014, if I were running for election today, I will go on the job plank. And you will ask me
so we'll
where are
throw
the
up our
jobs,
hands when the jobs don't happen?
and you will ask me where are the jobs, and I will say we'll try our best.